Welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coach for Success in Sport and Business. G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. My name's Emma Doyle and I'm so excited to be sitting here with Barb Van Hare. Did I pronounce it right?
Yes, you did.
Yes, we're winning. We're winning with that. Barb's an executive coach, talent development leader, and change consultant of Kinetic Clarity. Barb, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
All right. So we'll kick it off, Barb. It is the Vegemite question. Now, I don't know if you've been to Australia. I don't even know if you've tried it, but I'm dying to find out. What's your take on Vegemite?
Yeah, well, I'm embarrassed to say I have not tried it. And so that's just a sad thing. And I do need to get down to visit Australia. But I have a feeling I wouldn't like it anyway. So I know what you're going to do next. You may ask me a question because I don't like it and I haven't tried it, right?
Have you listened to the podcast before?
Oh,
maybe. So you're right. Please, based on that fact, why don't you start with your worst coaching moment and what were some of the lessons?
Yeah, so I was coaching a lovely leader, and we were having just a fantastic time working on her and all of her stuff. But the thing I missed was the environment that she was in. And we went into a situation to kind of align with her boss. And what I realized is I was throwing her to the wolves. Like, she was trying to make all these changes, but we couldn't affect everything around her. And I just felt like I completely, utterly, totally failed her because I just, as coaches, we really want to serve and make, things better for the people that we're working with. And I couldn't do it because everything around her was a complete disaster. And anyway, the thing for me is like, I want to try to fix everything. I mean, I'm not a fixer and coaches aren't fixers, but for me in that moment, I really was like, I felt like I just totally failed. And, but the one thing I did realize is like we did do by focusing on her was at least she had choices. And so I still think it was okay to make her a better person where she was, even if everybody else around her couldn't she couldn't succeed. Like, she was, I don't know, I was appalled. Like, it was really bad leadership behavior. So I think for me, when I see really bad examples of leadership, I just have to get out of there. Like, have you ever run into somebody that you really can't coach? And it's like, and it wasn't her, but it was everybody around her. And anyway, so long story short, I'm a bit of a coward when I run into people that I can't relate to, that are just so not open to change. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm kind of embarrassed that some people are not coachable, but.
Yeah, no, it makes 100% sense. I think I'm even going to pick your brain just on that later on about how we manage the leader and the coachee. I think that's a fascinating topic. We might take a deeper dive into that a bit later. Thanks for sharing that one. What about on the flip side? Have you got a moment that went well and what was the lesson?
Yeah, there was, I was coaching somebody who was a really strong analytical type, and he was having a lot of frustration at work and was super reactive. And so we walked through a bunch of tools and kind of some different ways of just kind of relaxing and not trying to control everybody around him. And the best moment is he came back at the end. He said all these things we talked through about me, like listening more and, really kind of being in better relationship. He's like, I think it saved my marriage. And I was like, oh, yes, because this stuff is not just about work, or it's not just about sports. And it's like the whole life. And like, who we are at work is who we are at home. And so I just love that what we do actually just has an impact across everything, even though we're usually brought in to do the work thing.
I love that story. It reminds me back in 2006 when I first became a coach off the tennis court, and these 7 people in that course, we're still friends today because of massive life change, like totally different, but we all had life changes. We were in this business coaching course, but our lives transformed that year. And today we catch up. It's awesome. They're the
Yeah.
best bunch of girls.
It
Thank
affects
you.
everything. Like who you are is everything, and the people you change with mean everything. So I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And speaking of making change, our next question is the sliding doors question. Have you seen the movie, by the way?
I love that movie. Absolutely one of my favorite movies. And it's interesting to think about. And there are a few moments where everything changed for me. But the one that was more business related, I had been working as a talent development leader in an organization for about 6 months. And I worked so hard, and I'm a type A, I want to do great and get a good grade, right? I'm kind of motivated that way. And the head of HR had decided, heard this through the grapevine, that everybody was going to get a 3 out of 5 on their mid-year review. And I am just a no BS gal. And I was like, this is so BS. And so my poor boss, who actually was more of a peer for me, he's like, well, Barb, I know you've worked really hard, but you have a 3. And I was like, okay, BS, first of all. I was like, well, what would a 5 look like? And they weren't able to say it. Anyway, long story short, in the moment, I hadn't even talked to my husband or anything. I'm like, I think I'm gonna quit. And it was before a long weekend, and he's like, what? He's like, why don't you get back to me on Tuesday? I was like, yeah, okay. And I kind of went home, I thought about it. I was like, I'm out of here. I cannot handle this kind of hypocrisy. Let's not even do performance management. So anyway, long story short, I went off and got into coaching, started my own business and all of that stuff. But I sometimes think about what if I had stayed, been able to manage some of that discomfort and worked through it, and I might have continued on that corporate career in HR and things like that. And I sometimes miss the idea of being in a team, being a force of change in cultures and things like that. But at the end of the day, this was my calling. So to just, quit on the spur of the moment was the thing that needed to happen. But that was totally sliding door, because there's another me out there who stayed instead of,
I love that there's another me out there. What a great way, another great way to think about it. That's awesome. In 1 to a maximum of 3 words, Barb, what do you think makes a great coach?
Okay, well, I know you like this question, and I'm fine tuning. I'm going to say love and listening, and then curiosity. And I think they match up with some of your words too. Maybe.
I have a feeling that you and I could do a 3-hour podcast.
Probably could. I know we could go into all of these.
Could you just expand just a tiny bit with your lens cap of each of those?
Oh, totally. You mean I get more words? Yes.
Yes. Now you can expand.
When I think about what it takes to be a good coach, is this huge capacity for non-judgment and caring and compassion. And so I think that love place, I know in corporate, we don't like to say the L word, but that's what it is. It's having a big heart and believing in people, even when they don't believe in themselves, or when they've got stuff to work through. If they feel any kind of shame, they need somebody to believe in them and care about them enough to get through that so they can get to a better place. So that compassion piece or caring piece is huge. And then listening is really about being super present and attentive. And it's not about being in our own agenda, but it's being there for the other person, to me. And then the curiosity, it's just being open, because it's really, I was a consultant before, and to go to coaching where your value is not associated with what you deliver, but in how well you ask questions and don't know. And so that curiosity kind of represents this ability to be not knowing or not the expert. So did that help expand on that?
100% helped. And you had an awesome distinction with curiosity that I love, that we don't need to know the answer. I definitely grew up in a world where, as the tennis coach, you are the expert, or as the sports coach, you're seen as the most knowledgeable person there. Yet many times I would fail a student, with maybe looking at a forehand, but addressing something else. And I in the workplace, the minute I I think I know how to fix something. And we mentioned that earlier. We're not fixers, but the minute we think we know how to fix, it's like, hang on, let me just be more curious first.
Right.
Go to curiosity first. I'm not saying, one of the guests recently, what makes a great coach, she said, accessing your intuition. And I think
yes,
tapping into that and knowing when to go there is coaching mastery, which I hope that I get that when I'm in my 80s.
I'm still playing around with that too. But, as you were saying that, I think there's like a polarity or a paradox in that, I think we need, even as leaders or as coaches, whatever, we need to show up totally not knowing and curious, but we also have to be comfortable with our certainty and our confidence. And so we really kind of have to have both. Because if you're only curious, then you don't really trust yourself in what you know. But if you only know what you know and you don't open yourself up, anyway, so it's kind of a weird tension to hold, I think.
It is. It's a beautiful sort of tipping point, a balance point. And right, I think I mentioned to you, one of my words I've been playing around with is co-tour, because it's the coach hat.
Ooh.
And then it's the mentor hat of having the confidence to know which tool, which is still about asking questions, but when to ask what. Which is, I think, a real mentor piece of the coaching arm.
Totally. Yeah.
Do you like that? Do you like it? I'm still exploring it. I haven't.
Yeah.
All right. If I've got Barb's approval, I'm going to keep exploring. I'm going to keep being curious about that one.
Yes.
Love listening and curiosity. Fantastic. And our last official question on the coaching podcast is, what question do you have for us? What sparks Barb's curiosity?
I'm always really curious about how people are reactive, like when they're under stress or tension, but also more importantly too, like how they manage it. And so how that's coming up for me, I'm just taking a course on the Enneagram. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if I could ask everybody what their Enneagram type was, it would just give me so much information into who they are as a human and what they struggle with, and how they're trying to be better, and where they're learning about themselves. And so that I know that was maybe not just one question, but no, that's always where I'm interested.
Yeah. And I, being from a performance background, I'm always curious around how people perform under pressure.
Yeah.
One of the tools that I've been playing around with is called Heliconia out of France. And it's all about how you are in your natural state and how you are under pressure.
Yeah.
And how people then react. So in order to help sports coaches coach people in their natural environment on a practice session and then on competition day, which I think is so transferable to the workplace. I mean, that's what this whole coaching podcast is about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, because under that stress and strain, you want to bring out the best in people, but it's also stress and strain can really bring out the worst. And so to be super interested in what happens in that performance state is what it is all about, right? I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And let alone all the neuroscience of all the chemicals that are hitting the body. And I'm fascinated in that as well. Maybe it is for another podcast. Well, those questions are absolutely brilliant answers and reflections. Thank you for sharing. So now we get to go a little bit rogue, because you said you've got a little bit of extra time for me. Yeah. We appreciate that. So can I go back to something you said earlier, or what recommendations do you have for coaches to navigate the situation when you're coaching somebody, but there's a leader or a boss or even a stakeholder or someone who's even paying your bills? And in the sports world, that's often the parent. Right. So the parent's paying for the lesson, but your student is the player. So how can we besides running away? What are some of your best tips on how can we help coaches navigate that?
Yeah, I think, we're going to discover some stuff together, because I actually am not sure. I think conventional wisdom and what I hear everybody say is you've got to go top down, but we don't always have that invitation. And whether it's parents in sports or the senior C-suite leaders, oftentimes, if I'll use a Brene term, those folks are fairly armored up. And so they're asking us to, fix down there. And I've just come to the place where I'm like, whoever's willing, I am there for you. And if I can at least get you to the point where you're not taking your baggage with you wherever you go, then my point of view is that we're making the world a better place, self-awareness wise. And I'd like to think some of these folks, once they open their eyes up, are not going to put up with that kind of armored bad behavior from the people around them that are supposed to be with them. But I don't know. I mean, this one leader, I think, they're still there, but it's painful to see somebody try to change in a system that's not changing with them. So, I mean, what do you what is your point of view on that? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, well, I think that, one thing I'll just pick up on in what you said that I loved is permission. So again, we can lead the horse to water, but we can't make it drink.
Right.
I think as a coach, that's something we always need to keep in mind. But what came up for me is this, you use the word courageous a lot in your work, but having that courageous conversation. And one of my favorite little strategies around that, I call it a coaching, it's called TFFI, We Can Fly. It sounds like an airline, doesn't it? You like that?
Yes. That
so it's
good.
Just a topic, facts, feeling, impact is TFFI.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
And then the We Can Fly is, this is what I want. This is how I've contributed to the situation.
Right.
And the last F is, so moving forwards. And if you can get through all of that without them jumping into space, or you ask for permission to get through that conversation of your observations, your facts, and your feelings, which someone can never argue with your own feelings. I love that little strategy around having that courageous conversation, something that I've avoided most of my career, especially with parents early in my sporting coaching career. I've helped a lot of students that I've worked with actually reframe their parents' comments. Like reframing is like the biggest, like your dad didn't really mean that, or your mum didn't really mean, what they really meant was they care. They just expressed it in a way that I want you to reframe.
Yeah.
But I think having that conversation, I'm working with a parent at the moment of a very sort of high performing 14-year-old boy. And that parent is coming along, and they're very Eastern European, and they're very, they acknowledge that they don't have the skills. So I think it's a combination of permission, courageous conversations, and also you can only do what you can do. So compartmentalize comes to mind as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of maybe the last resort. I love that you have a structure, because I think we need as much structure as we can get when we're going to be super brave and have a hard conversation like that. But as you were talking, it just reminded me that my actual home base is, I actually do believe everybody's doing the best they can. And that comes from some of Brene Brown's work too. But when you said you're helping the players reframe, I think you can do that because these parents or these leaders who the behaviors on the outside might be really damaging. They're actually doing the best they can in the circumstances they're in. And usually their intentions are they're not trying to be jerks. That may be what's happening, but that reframe thing is just a good reminder, because we know how to do that as coaches too. So I think that's a great approach. Yeah,
absolutely. So what is your background with becoming a certified Dare to Lead facilitator? How did that spark your interest? Why did you do that course? And why Brene Brown? Because I know we all love her, and the strength in vulnerability, but I'd love to hear your connection.
Yeah, well, and I may have to even go back after I say the first thing, which is I was with a friend and colleague, somebody I was doing some coaching work with, and she just said, "Oh, I'm so excited. I just applied for Brene Brown." And I just thought, Dare Lead facilitation. And I was like, oh, you're kidding. Like, I had no idea. I didn't do the research. This is me. Like, I'm just like, opportunities show up and I like try to take them, but I'm not the person that figured it all out. And I was like, would you be okay if I tried to? And she's like, of course. And so anyway, it was totally last minute, 2 weeks before the the window closed. And so I got really lucky. And so she took 700 or so people in 2019 and trained them to be her facilitators. And then I said 2019. Anyway, pandemic and everything else hit, and it just hasn't been on their radar to do again. But I know there's a huge amount of interest. And so if anybody's interested in becoming a facilitator, you can go to her website, the Dare to Lead website, and down below there's like stay in touch about that, because it's really great work. And I love that. But I would actually say before that, what got me ready for it was doing the coaching certification. So I know your organization does that. Getting accredited through ICF is really important. And I did my work through CTI, or the Coactive Training Institute. And I'm now on their faculty. So I help train coaches in that capacity. And so I had she likes to, Brene likes to train people who already have a business or a pretty solid foundation, and then her work fits into it. And so I do a lot of one-on-one team coaching, leadership development, all that kind of stuff that you do as well. And so it just kind of was a nice add-on to what I was doing.
Yeah, fantastic. And just on that, while we're talking about education, I know that you're certainly qualified in a number of tools, and you mentioned the Ideogram. What's your favorite? And I mean, there's so many tools out there. Like, what are you sort of your go-tos? Or
I kind of just, my motto is love the one you're with. And this week, the one I'm with is Enneagram, and the Integrative 9 Enneagram. I'm absolutely, totally geeking out all over it. It's really great.
okay.
But
and
I
so
also
did you train?
go ahead.
Did you become a trainer in that one, or are you doing that?
No,
right
I'm
now?
just a participant. It is so awesome to not be training. I have 2 weeks of just showing up and learning, which is awesome. So I do that. I like the Leadership Circle Profile 360, Hogan Leadership Assessments, MHS, EQI, what else? And I love Emergenetics. It's one of those like MBTI insights ones. So I'm a super geek when it comes to assessments, because I think people like having data. And I know in sports performance too, like really understanding that assessment of where you are and having that vision and dream about where you're going. And those assessments can help close that gap. So
as opposed or compared to 3 out of 5 performance reviews where everyone got that same number, that was a great story. So God. I mean, I think also, you know, I totally agree. I think having a tool, having the data point A to point C, and mapping out your road, I think.
Are there some that you use? Like, what do you use?
Yeah, just MBIT and DISC, and the other one, the Gallup Strengths, and the one that I'm really into is the Heliconia, which is a new one out of France. So I like that it's new, and I like that it's under pressure, because that's certainly, you know, my one-on-one coaching is all about performing under pressure.
There's a song for that too.
Yeah. You want to, should we start singing on the coaching?
Maybe next time.
But yeah, I also was coaching somebody recently that their performance reviews were really hurting the way that they were interacting with their leaders. Like, it was just so not productive. So I like all these tools, but I think also there's this particular company then moved to all you needed to do was simply say to your manager, hey, this really works for me, but this really doesn't. Yeah. So I think they've moved from, you know, they've moved one level. I mean, obviously the second half of that sentence, you know, was so many other better ways maybe of framing that. When you work with companies, what's that sort of ideal, again, a little bit, we're talking a lot about the manager as well, giving the coachee feedback. What do you think's ideal with regards to performance reviews, and, you know, how you integrate?
That's a really good question. I think that I'd love to see a world where feedback is like automatic and it doesn't wait for a quarter, mid-year, end of year. You know, and we're all brave enough and thankful enough to take it. but we're also brave enough to give it and caring enough to give it. So that would kind of be ideal, is that, but you still have to figure out how to pay people, promote people, and do different things. So I know those numbers kind of matter. But I hate the bell curve. Like, we've got to throw out the bell curve, because those demotivate A players like nothing I've ever seen. Like me, you know, I was like, I want to be, I'm not a 3, like, put me in a box. Like, anyway, so that's just me. So I don't know. I mean, what are you seeing out there too? There are a lot of companies still committed to this.
Well, I think I'm seeing a lot of confusion in the hybrid workplace, because I totally agree. I would love to see people be able to just, you know, not be so stuck in the past of this is not what works, or this is, I didn't like it when you said this, or, you know, let's just go to what, you know, I call that future-based language. I love that future-based way of then bringing things back to the present, executing and delivering. But I think, I don't know the answer in the new hybrid format of how
that's people, a good point.
You know, they make space for that, because often the meetings are about a task.
Right.
I think there's so many other things we can do, because I know I absolutely loved your talk at the Mile High Society Human Resource Annual Conference that we both spoke at last week. Oh my goodness, was it last week? But you were just so brilliant, the way that you were able to relate to the challenges facing these HR managers, and taking off your armor and self-care as coaches. What are some of your go-to strategies with self-care for coaches?
Man, that's a lifetime of learning for me. And the 2 basics are sleep and exercise, for sure. And I struggle with, you know, being consistently healthy in how I eat, but it's also how I talk to myself. So I think part of what coaching can be really helpful with is really discovering those inner critics, saboteurs, or voices. And really, at some point, it's just finally like, oh my gosh, I almost couldn't hear them, but other people could hear it, like coaches could hear them for me. I mean, I'm just brutal to myself. And so really trying to reframe how I talk to myself internally has been a big help. But yeah, I don't know. Sleep and exercise seem to be the foundation. I mean, how about you? I mean, it's been stressful for everybody. Like, how are you navigating stress and taking care of yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm born in October. You know those scales?
Yeah.
Very rarely are they sitting level. I'd like to pretend that they are, but one of the things I think similar to you, in the fact that I throw myself into a project or completing this book. People are probably sick of me saying that on the podcast. The struggle is real, ladies and gentlemen.
It is.
The struggle is real. But so finding that balance, yes, I think you've hit the nail on the head with definitely exercise and just being still, taking time just to, and even I've had a lot of success with some of my clients, just 6 to 10 minute mindfulness, personalized recordings that are for them, specific to them, and just helping them stop. And a lot of my clients have just said that 6 minutes was, you know, because often if I do a half hour, they're like, no, I don't have half an hour. So they never end up doing it. So making it
personalized is such a key right there.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think that's important. And I do them for myself.
Yeah.
So
right. Because you can. I mean, why wouldn't you? That is so great.
Yeah. And also I loved in your talk just about the armor. Would you mind just sharing? I love I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but you had some really great wordings around the types of armor to help people put language to could you just share a bit more about that?
Well, and just to tie it back to Brene, she has 11 types of armor. It's a little bit different than's in her book. Great podcast on that. But really, if you take a look across all the research, I sort of combined it. And we used to say fight or flight, and now I'm looking at fight or flight, and then there's a freeze. And then I've added some other ones in there, but or fold. And so the folding is sort of like over pleasing. Like when things are kind of crazy and dangerous, like you try to get as close to everybody else as you can and make them like you. And a lot of people pleasers know what that is. And then there's the flight where it's just like things are, well, and here in a virtual world and a virtual team, it's the easiest thing in the world to turn off your computer and you are gone. And so I think all of us have had to navigate when we're working from home, how we're available to each other. But I think there's a flight response. There's definitely, I have a fight response, a real strong controller that, you know, really wants to manage situations. But I also, in my coaching, I think some people go to judgment. And the judgment is a way of putting yourself, if you read anything from Arbinger group, I love their stuff. But we put ourselves in a better than box and everybody else in a less than box, and that makes us feel better about ourselves. So that's another form of armor. I think I covered all of them. Oh, freeze. Well, then freeze out. That was, I mean, shoot, overwhelm. That's what overwhelm is. So I don't think I did that quite as elegantly as I did last week, but hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, but I love when we can just give things language. It's easier to say, hey, I'm just going to take my fold armor off, or and let yourself be seen, because we're only human at the end of the day, and all navigating through this together. And in my presentation, one of the fourth trait that makes up, I did what all champions have in common, was resilience. And
yes,
I really liked your take on resilience. I think because of what we just spoke about, that's triggered my memory in you reframing, or well, please elaborate, but from resilience to perseverance, because of everything we've been going through. But could you expand a little bit more on that? And don't tell me I have to change one of my chapters in the book.
No, I hope not. That'll be really funny. I actually love the word resilience. And what I learned is that it's a pretty unique English language word. It's hard to translate into other European languages when I was doing some training on this, but it's this idea that you can be really strong, resilience is, and also very flexible so that you can rebound and come back to a position. So like we build buildings to withstand earthquakes and come back, and like a willow tree is really strong and a storm can do something to it, but it'll come back. But I had one friend and it was so funny. I was just talking about what's going on with him. And he's like, if I hear the word resilience one more time, I'm absolutely going to just like throw up. And he's like, I can't stand it. I was like, what? Like, I love that word. And he's like, there's no going back. There's no bouncing back. And he's in healthcare. And so, and trying to serve those leaders, and they're exhausted. And his whole thing was, he felt like there were so many false peaks. Like, what is the end of this? Like, I don't even know what that means. And so it kind of made sense. And so perseverance, it was slightly different, but it's this ability to have like grit and determination to keep going through challenges. And so it doesn't have that like elastic snap back. It's a little more deeper strength to like keep moving. And so it's totally not mine. It was my friend that came up with it, but I'm sort of intrigued by it. But yeah, like how is that showing up for you too, this perseverance versus resilience?
Yeah, I think that the two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Because I 100% agree that we're moving forward constantly to a new normal.
Yeah.
And therefore, and in the sporting world, the number one skill that I've had to teach over countless years, especially in the sport of tennis, is how often you come second in the rally. I mean, every second point, you're losing the point, right?
Yeah, right.
So if you can't bounce back from that, and if you can't do that game after game after game, I mean, that's what I learned.
That is resilience.
US college tennis. That is like, every girl that I played was just as good as me. It was like, how am I going to beat this girl? It was like, who has more resilience and perseverance to stay out on the court as long as possible, which is kind of what the world we're in as we move into 2022. I know that you and I spoke off air earlier how excited we are about the year. Yeah. We have to persevere and be able to bounce back. When my father-in-law said to me the other day, he said, Emma, he goes, when you get your 9th no, celebrate. Celebrate.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Because number 10, it'll be a yes.
Yeah. And that's perseverance.
But it's also each time you get knocked back is resilience, because you got to pick up the phone, or you've got to resend that email, or you've got to reconnect with that person. So it's bounce back, bounce back, bounce back, and do it over and over again. So I think as now that I'm extending this beautiful book process, I think perseverance may just make an appearance under the resilience chapter.
Well, I do, as we were talking through it, I think they go hand in hand, because they're slightly different, but both needed. Like, keep going and have that determination, but also to kind of rebound and reset. Because you're absolutely right, especially in tennis in particular, but in whatever sport, like my boys play volleyball, watching them get out of the headspace of we just lost a point and get back in position and be ready for the next thing is absolutely resilience. And we all need that too. I think we need both. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. What a great way just to wrap up the episode. And in the workplace, I mean, we do get knocked down. We get a deal not accepted, or we get a lead who ends a contract. So, on a different scale, micro versus macro resilience, I think what a great way just to really conclude that we're all on the right track.
Yes.
And it's not easy.
We're strong.
And we're strong. And we're brave. Come on, throw out a few more grenades. Renee for me.
We can do it.
Yes.
We'll be in the arena.
Yeah, I love it. Fantastic. And of course, who we are is how we lead. Yes. And love, listening, and curiosity. There's been so many gold dust moments on this episode. I hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as I have, just getting to know you more, Barb. And I'd love to continue to stay in touch.
Me too.
You are a Colorado person, and I am too. I could actually say that now. It feels a bit more legit now. I've got my green card. Woohoo. So, but I just really appreciate your time, your effort, your energy, and just how easy you made everyone feel last week. And that's just, that's a skill in itself. It's such I honestly think we could do a 3-hour podcast, but everyone's like, no, Emma, wrap it up. Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, thanks again, Barb.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm just super appreciative. I totally want to stay in touch, and what you're doing is really important. So thank you for having me.
Right back at you. Thanks everybody for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to give it a rating and a review on your podcast listening device. Thanks for listening.